My name is Bianca Atwood. I'm 30 years old. On the night of my 30th birthday, a stranger walked into the restaurant, handed me a birth certificate, and the name under Mother was someone I had never heard of in my life. My dad shot out of his chair and ripped it to pieces before I could finish reading it. My mom just sat there, frozen, mascara already running, and didn't say a single word. 40 people watched it happen, 40 people who had just been singing happy birthday. And that stranger, still standing in the doorway, looked at my father and smiled. I don't know what you'd do in that moment. I know what I did. And nothing, not my family, not the 29 years of silence before that night, not the things I found out afterward, has been the same since. Before I walk you through everything, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you truly connect with this story, and drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to know where you're listening from. Now let me take you back to early October, 3 weeks before that birthday, the night my phone rang at 4 a.m. I was 12 hours into a night shift at Mercy General when my phone buzzed in my scrub pocket. Unknown number, area code I didn't recognize. I let it ring out. We had a code blue on the 3rd floor and a waiting room backed up to the parking lot. Whatever it was could wait. But here's the thing about working nights as a nurse. You develop a sixth sense for things that are wrong. Vitals that dip a half beat too slow, a patient's breathing that shifts, and something about that missed call sat in my chest like a stone I couldn't swallow. I should tell you about my life at that point. I was renting a 1-bedroom apartment 6 blocks from the hospital. I drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic. I ate dinner at my parents' house every Sunday after church, pot roast, green beans, and whatever dessert my mom Patricia had stress-baked that week. My dad, Gerald, sat at the head of the table and said grace. We were the Atwood family, pillars of the congregation. Gerald was a deacon at Calvary Baptist. Patricia had been voted Mother of the Year by the Women's Ministry 3 times running. And I was their only child. Their miracle, my mom used to say. The thing is, I'd stare at the family photo above the mantel sometimes. Gerald, tall, fair-haired, blue eyes like creek water. Patricia, petite, straight brown hair, freckled nose. And then me, dark curly hair, deep brown eyes, skin a shade darker than anyone on either side. I used to stare at that photo and wonder. Then my mom would catch me looking, and her chin would tremble, and I'd feel like a monster for even thinking it. The unknown number called again at 4 a.m. This time it left a voicemail. Miss Atwood, this isn't a scam. I have information about your biological mother. Please call me back. I deleted it the way you swat a fly. Quick, automatic. I didn't know I was swatting away 30 years of truth. Sunday dinner, October 6th. The pot roast was dry, but nobody said so because nobody ever said so. I wasn't going to mention the voicemail. I really wasn't. But it had been rattling around in my head for 2 days, and I figured maybe if I brought it up casually, my parents would laugh it off, and that would be that. Something weird happened Thursday night, I said, passing the green beans. Got a call from some stranger, said they had information about my biological mother. Gerald's knife stopped mid-cut. The blade hovered over the meat, perfectly still. 5 seconds of nothing. Then he set the knife down, lined it up parallel to the plate edge, precise, controlled. Scammers are getting creative these days. He didn't look at me when he said it. Patricia moved instantly, the way she always did when silence got too heavy. Oh, honey, let's talk about your birthday party. I reserved the back room at Magnolia's. I'm thinking white tablecloths and pink peonies. Your favorite. They weren't my favorite. Patricia liked peonies. I'd never been asked. I've already sent out 40 invitations, she went on, her voice climbing half an octave. The Whitfields, the Brennans, Pastor Coleman, your friends from the hospital. It's going to be beautiful. Gerald stood from the table. He carried his plate to the sink, rinsed it, and set it in the rack. Every motion deliberate. Then he turned around and looked at me. Not angry, not worried, just flat. If that number calls again, block it. He dried his hands on the dish towel. We don't entertain strangers in this family. He walked out of the kitchen. The floorboards creaked down the hallway. His study door clicked shut. Patricia smiled at me across the table. Her eyes were wet. Pink peonies, she said. Trust me. Monday morning. I came home after 16 hours on my feet and found a manila envelope wedged into my mailbox. No return address, no postage stamp, hand-delivered. I stood in the lobby of my apartment building, still in scrubs, and stared at it. My name was printed in neat block letters, Bianca Atwood, nothing else. Inside, a single handwritten note and a photocopied document. The document was a partial birth certificate. The top half was visible. A date of birth. My date of birth. October 26, 1996. Same hospital, same county. But the line where the mother's name should be was blacked out with marker, deliberately obscured. Someone wanted me to see enough to ask questions, but not enough to get answers. Not yet. The note was short. I know this is a shock. I've been trying to reach you by phone. If you want the truth, meet me at the coffee shop on Main Street, Saturday, 2 p.m., NC. I sat down on the cold tile floor of my kitchen and didn't move for 20 minutes. The faucet dripped. The refrigerator hummed. And for the first time in my life, the question I'd buried since childhood wasn't just a thought anymore. It was a piece of paper in my hand. I called Patricia. She picked up on the first ring, like she'd been waiting. Someone left something in my mailbox, I said. A birth certificate. Mom? Burn it. Her voice cracked. Someone is trying to destroy this family, Bianca. Burn it. Don't believe a word. Mom, it has my date of birth on it. Please, baby, burn it. For me. I told her I would, but I didn't. I slid the envelope into the drawer of my nightstand and closed it. And I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to my own heartbeat, wondering whose blood was making it pump. Saturday, 2 o'clock. I almost drove past the coffee shop twice. The man sitting at the corner table had a laptop open, a leather folder beside it, and a cup of black coffee he hadn't touched. Mid-30s, clean-shaven, calm eyes. He stood when I walked in. Miss Atwood, I'm Nathan Cross. Thank you for coming. You're NC, I said. I am. He gestured to the chair across from him. I'm a private investigator, former police officer, now specializing in family reunification cases. I sat down but didn't take off my jacket. Who hired you? He opened the leather folder. A woman named Margaret Calloway. She's 50 years old. She lives in Nashville. And she believes, with considerable evidence, that she is your biological mother. The coffee shop was playing soft jazz. A barista was steaming milk. None of it sounded real. Nathan slid a document across the table. A full birth certificate this time. No blacked-out lines. Mother. Margaret Calloway. Father. Gerald Atwood. I read the father's name 3 times. That's my dad. Yes. Nathan's voice was level. Practiced, but not cold. Gerald Atwood is your biological father. He's listed on the original certificate. But there's no adoption record on file in any courthouse in Tennessee. No legal transfer of custody. Then how? Your mother was 19, a nursing student. She was doing a clinical rotation at the hospital where Gerald worked as an administrative manager. He paused. He used his position to pressure her into signing a voluntary relinquishment. She was told she'd lose her placement if she didn't. I stared at the birth certificate. The ink was 30 years old. The truth was older. Your mother didn't give you up, Miss Atwood. Nathan closed the folder gently. She was pushed out. And just like that, everything I'd been told about where I came from turned to smoke. I drove home from that coffee shop at 30 miles an hour in a 50 zone. Cars honked behind me. I didn't care. There's a math you do in your head when the floor drops out from under you. You add up what you'll lose if you push forward, and you weigh it against what you've already lost without knowing it. If I confronted Gerald and Patricia, I'd lose Sunday dinners. I'd lose my seat in the 3rd pew at Calvary Baptist. I'd lose the version of my childhood where I was loved unconditionally, and I'd gain, what? A stranger in Nashville who claimed she'd been looking for me? But then I thought about the other column. 30 years of a woman I'd never met. A medical history I didn't have. Margaret's family carried a history of breast cancer. Nathan had mentioned that. I was a nurse. I knew what missing information could cost. I drove past my parents' house on the way home. Gerald was in the front yard, watering the azaleas. Late afternoon light on his face. hose in one hand, the other in his pocket, easy, unhurried, like a man with nothing to hide. And that calm, that terrifying, practiced calm, was what finally told me. A man who just learned his daughter got a mysterious call and a mysterious envelope would be rattled. He'd ask questions. He'd want to investigate. Gerald didn't ask a single question. He told me to block the number. He told me to burn the envelope. He wasn't confused. He was managing. I pulled into my apartment lot and sat in the car with the engine off. The sun was going down. I could hear a dog barking somewhere on the next block. 30 years of silence had been a price someone paid. I just didn't know until now that it was my mother. Monday morning, I requested a copy of my childhood medical records from the family clinic. Dr. Russell Kemp had been our physician since I was in diapers. He was retired now, but the records were still on file. The receptionist emailed them over that afternoon. I opened the PDF on my phone during lunch break, sitting in the hospital cafeteria with a turkey sandwich I never touched. Page 6, routine blood work, age 5, blood type, B positive. I set my phone down, picked it up again, read the line 4 more times. I already knew my parents' blood types. Patricia had told me hers years ago during a conversation about donating. O negative. Universal donor, she'd said, like it was something to be proud of. Gerald's was listed on a Red Cross card I'd seen in his wallet once, a positive. Here's the thing about blood types that any first-year nursing student knows. 2 parents with type A and type O cannot produce a child with type B. The allele isn't there. It's not a gray area. It's not a maybe. It's a biological wall. Patricia was not my biological mother. I sat in that cafeteria surrounded by 100 people eating lunch and felt more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Somebody laughed at a table near the window. A tray clattered. I pulled up Nathan's number and typed 3 words. I need everything. He responded in under a minute. When can you meet? I looked at the birth certificate date again. October 26th. My birthday was in 12 days. Patricia had booked magnolias. 40 people were coming. White tablecloths, pink peonies. I typed back, after my birthday. And then I added, I have a plan. 3 nights before the party, I lay on my back in bed and counted ceiling tiles. I kept replaying moments from my childhood. Not the big ones, the small ones. Patricia dabbing concealer under her eyes every morning before church. Gerald's hand on my shoulder, steering me away from conversations he didn't want me to hear. The time I was 13 and asked why my baby photos started at 3 months instead of birth, and Patricia burst into tears so hard she couldn't breathe, and I apologized for an hour. I counted the times I'd been shut down with tears or silence when I asked a simple question. 15. At least 15 times over 30 years. Tears weren't grief in that house. They were a lock. I called Nathan at 11 p.m. He picked up on the second ring. My birthday's Saturday. 40 people will be at Magnolia's. I know. If I confront them privately, they'll cry. They'll change the subject. They'll find a way to make me feel guilty. They've been doing it my whole life. Nathan was quiet for a moment. What are you asking me? I'm asking you to come to my birthday dinner. Bring the documents, the birth certificate, the certified copies. Bianca, are you sure? That's a public setting. I tried private. You tried private. You called twice. You sent a letter. Gerald blocked everything. The only way to get the truth onto the table is to put it on a table where he can't flip it. Another pause. Then, Margaret wants to be there. She's been waiting 30 years. My throat tightened. Tell her I'll meet her, but not until the truth is out. I don't want to see my mother for the first time while I'm still living inside someone else's lie. I hung up. The ceiling tiles hadn't moved, but everything underneath them had. For 30 years, they chose the lie. On my birthday, I was choosing the truth. Magnolia's sat on the corner of Broad and Vine, a brick-front restaurant with white shutters and a wraparound porch, the kind of place where people celebrated anniversaries and retirements and the births of grandchildren, the kind of place where nothing bad was supposed to happen. Patricia had outdone herself. The back room glowed with string lights and candles, white tablecloths, just like she'd promised, pink peonies in mason jars on every table, a 3-tier cake with buttercream roses and Happy 30th Bianca piped in lavender script. 40 guests filtered in between 6:30 and 7. Donna Whitfield arrived first, wearing her church pearls. She hugged Patricia and told her the decorations were simply divine. The Brennans came next, then Pastor Coleman with his wife, then a group of my coworkers from the hospital, still in that post-shift glow, hair freshly washed, happy to be anywhere that wasn't fluorescent lit. Gerald sat at the head of the long table naturally. Navy dress shirt, top button fastened. He shook hands with every guest like a politician working a room, warm, measured, in control. I walked in at 7:15. "There she is!" Patricia clasped her hands together. "The birthday girl!" I smiled, hugged people, accepted a glass of wine I didn't plan to drink. Inside my bag, zipped into the interior pocket, was a copy of my original birth certificate and my childhood medical records. My phone held Nathan's number at the top of my recent contacts. He was sitting at the bar in the front room of the restaurant, 30 feet away, nursing a ginger ale, waiting for my text. Outside, in the parking lot, a silver sedan idled with its headlights off. I didn't know what Margaret Calloway looked like yet, but I knew she was out there, waiting, the way she'd been waiting for 3 decades. I took my seat. Patricia raised her glass. "Everyone, a toast to my beautiful daughter. 30 years of blessings." Patricia stood at the head of the table, wine glass trembling slightly in her hand. The room quieted. 40 faces turned toward her. 30 years ago, she said, Gerald and I were given the most precious gift. I remember the day Bianca was born. Gerald held her first. He wouldn't let anyone else near her. She laughed, dabbing the corner of her eye. She was so small. She had my mother's nose. I looked down at my plate. I did not have her mother's nose. I had never met her mother. Her mother died when I was 4, and the only photo I'd ever seen showed a woman with a thin, straight nose and pale gray eyes. Nothing like mine. From the moment I first held her, Patricia continued, her voice going thick with emotion, I knew God gave her to me. Donna Whitfield lifted her glass. "Patricia, you are the most devoted mother I know." Murmurs of agreement rippled around the table. Someone said, "Amen." Gerald nodded once from his end of the table, a king acknowledging a correct answer from a courtier. Under the table, I unlocked my phone. My thumb hovered over Nathan's name. The string lights caught the edge of my wine glass and threw small prisms across the white tablecloth. Patricia was still talking, something about first steps and chicken pox and the time I sang a solo at the church Christmas pageant in 4th grade. She was painting a portrait, a beautiful, meticulous portrait of a family that, as of 12 days ago, I knew was built on a forgery. God didn't give me to you, I thought. My mother did, because she had no choice. I tapped the message. 2 words. "Come in." I pressed send and set the phone face down on my lap. The door to the back room opened. Conversations didn't stop all at once. They stuttered. One table fell quiet, then the next, like dominoes. Nathan Cross stood in the doorway, gray sport coat, no tie, a manila envelope in his right hand. Gerald looked up from his seat. The color left his face in real time, starting at his forehead, draining down through his cheeks, his jaw, his neck. It happened in about 2 seconds, and I watched every fraction of it. He recognized Nathan. I could see it. Not from tonight, from before, from the calls, from the letter. Gerald knew exactly who this man was. "I'm sorry to interrupt." Nathan's voice was steady, professional, not loud, but it carried. "My name is Nathan Cross. I'm a private investigator. I need to give Miss Atwood a document." The room went so quiet I could hear the kitchen on the other side of the wall, plates clinking, a cook calling an order. Nathan walked to my chair and held out the envelope. "Happy birthday, Miss Atwood." I took it. My fingers were completely steady, which surprised me. I opened the flap, pulled out the single sheet of paper inside, an original birth certificate, certified by the county clerk, State of Tennessee. I read the name out loud. Mother, Margaret Calloway. 40 people breathing at the same time sounds like the ocean. A low, collective inhale. Gerald was on his feet before the sound faded. His chair scraped backward across the hardwood. He crossed the room in 4 steps, snatched the paper out of my hands and ripped it in half, then in half again. He threw the pieces on the floor. "This is a scam," he said. "This man is a fraud. Get out of my daughter's party." Nathan didn't move. He didn't even blink. Nathan reached down to the leather briefcase at his feet. He unzipped it slowly, the way a surgeon opens a kit. No rush, no drama, just procedure. He pulled out a thick stack of papers, each one clipped with a colored tab, and set them on the table in front of me. "I brought 12 copies, Mr. Atwood, certified by the county clerk, notarized." He straightened the stack with both hands. "And your daughter's biological mother is outside. She's been waiting 30 years. The room didn't gasp. Gasps are a movie thing. What happened was worse. A kind of collective paralysis. Forks frozen mid-air, mouths open with no sound coming out. Donna Whitfield set her wineglass down so carefully it didn't make a noise. Gerald stood 3 feet from me, fragments of the first birth certificate scattered around his shoes. His jaw was working, but nothing came out. I had never seen him without a sentence ready. Not once in 30 years. Patricia broke first. "Gerald?" Her voice was small, thin, but it wasn't the voice of a woman hearing shocking news. It was the voice of a woman who'd been dreading this specific moment for a very long time. "Patricia, don't." Gerald's hand shot up, palm out. The room heard it. Every person at those tables heard a husband tell his wife don't, and every person understood what that meant. Don't talk, don't confirm, don't let the walls come down. I stood up. My chair didn't scrape. I pushed it back gently. "Don't what, Dad?" My voice came out clear, calm, like calling a patient's name in the hallway. "Don't let her talk? Like you didn't let my mother talk for 30 years? Gerald stared at me. I stared back. "You can rip up paper. You can't rip up the truth." I'm going to pause here for a second. If you're watching this and your heart is beating a little faster, if you've ever had someone in your family rip up a conversation before it even started, you know exactly what that silence feels like. Drop a comment. Have you ever been told don't ask about something in your family? I want to hear your story. And if this is hitting home, the rest of what happened at that restaurant is going to shake you. Stay with me. The room split the way rooms always do when the truth hits, into people who want to know more and people who wish they'd left 5 minutes ago. A cluster near the door shifted on their feet, exchanging looks. Do we leave? Do we stay? A couple I recognized from church, the Brennans, kept their eyes on their plates, as if staring hard enough at the remains of their chicken marsala might rewind the last 3 minutes. But others leaned in. Donna Whitfield was the first. She stood up from her chair at the center of the long table, pearl necklace, pressed blouse, 62 years old, and built like a woman who had chaired every committee at Calvary Baptist for the last 2 decades. "Patricia," she said, "is this true?" Patricia's mascara was already running. Her fingers were knotted together in her lap. "It's not what it looks like. We adopted her legally." "Ma'am." Nathan's voice was polite but firm. "I have records from the county courthouse. There is no adoption file for Bianca Atwood. None. I've checked every jurisdiction in the state." Gerald pointed at Nathan. "You're trespassing. This is a private event." "It's a public restaurant, sir, and I was invited by your daughter." Everyone looked at me. I nodded. Gerald's eyes narrowed. His hand dropped, and for the first time in my life, I watched my father run out of moves. He stood in the middle of a room full of people who'd respected him for 20 years, and he had nothing left to say that wouldn't dig the hole deeper. Donna was still standing. "Gerald, just answer the question." He didn't. And in that silence, a dozen people started doing arithmetic. Dates, faces, features, all the things they'd been too polite to mention before tonight. Patricia did what Patricia had always done. She reached for the one weapon that had never failed her. She stood up, tears streaming, and took both of my hands in hers. Her grip was tight. Her fingers were cold. "I raised you," she said. "I held you when you had 103 fever and couldn't stop shaking. I drove you to school every single morning. I sat in the front row at your nursing school graduation and cried so hard I couldn't see straight." She squeezed my hands harder. "Doesn't that count? Doesn't any of it count?" Half the room softened. I could see it. The shoulders dropping, the sympathetic tilts of the head. Patricia was good at this. She'd been good at this my whole life. Turn the question into an accusation. Make the asker feel cruel for asking. But I was done playing that game. "Mom," I said, "what's your blood type?" She blinked. "Oh, negative. Why?" "Dad, what's yours?" Gerald's jaw tightened. "A positive." "Mine is B positive." I let that sit for a moment. A few people frowned, not following. But the 3 nurses from my unit, sitting at the far end of the table, got it immediately. I saw Karen Mitchell's eyes go wide. 2 parents with A and O blood types cannot have a child with type B. Biologically impossible. Any first-year nursing student knows this. Silence. Patricia looked at Gerald. Gerald looked at the floor. Donna Whitfield put her hand over her mouth. "Science doesn't cry to change the subject," I said. Not loud, not angry, just clear. Patricia sank back into her chair. Her hands released mine. For the first time in my life, her tears hit a wall they couldn't break through. And Gerald said nothing, which was louder than anything he'd ever said. Gerald straightened his cuffs. It was the smallest gesture, a reflex, something he did before board meetings and church council votes. He was resetting, trying to find the version of himself that controlled rooms. He turned to Nathan. "You have no legal right to come into this restaurant and disrupt a private gathering. I will sue you for harassment and emotional distress." Nathan took a slow breath. "Sir, delivering certified public records in a public restaurant is not harassment, but I'd encourage you to consult your attorney before making threats you'll regret." Gerald's voice dropped. He took a step toward me, not threatening, but close. Close enough that only the first row of tables could hear him clearly. But in a room that quiet, the first row was enough. "If you walk out that door to meet whoever is outside," he said, "don't bother coming back." The sentence landed like a slap. Donna Whitfield was on her feet again. "Gerald, that is your daughter." "Exactly." Gerald's voice rose for the first time all night. "My daughter. And I decide what's best for her." I looked at him, really looked. 30 years I'd feared that silence of his. The way he could walk out of a room and take all the oxygen with him. The way he could make you feel like a guest in your own life. But standing there, watching him threaten and posture in front of people who used to admire him, I finally saw it for what it was. Every cold silence, every blocked phone call, every intercepted letter, it wasn't authority, it was fear. I pushed my chair in, picked up my bag. "You decide what's best for me?" I said. "You decided that 30 years ago, and look how that turned out." I walked toward the door. Behind me, Gerald said one more thing. "Sit down." I didn't. The night air hit my face like cold water. October in Tennessee. The kind of evening where you can smell wood smoke and dry leaves and the last of the summer dying. I walked through the front room of the restaurant, past the bar where Nathan's ginger ale still sat, past the hostess stand, and out the front door. The parking lot was half full. Streetlights threw long shadows between the cars. And there, leaning against a silver sedan in the far corner of the lot, was a woman. She had dark curly hair pulled back in a low bun, brown eyes, olive skin. She was wearing a navy cardigan and holding a single flower, not a peony. A yellow daisy, simple and plain, the kind you'd pick from a roadside stand. I stopped 10 feet away. She was me. 20 years from now, standing in a parking lot, holding a flower, trying not to fall apart. "Happy birthday, Bianca." Her voice cracked on my name, just a hairline fracture, quickly mended. She held the daisy out with both hands, like an offering. I didn't take it. Not yet. "You're Margaret." "I am." We stood there. A car turned onto the street behind us, headlights sweeping the lot. A cricket chirped somewhere near the dumpster. The restaurant door opened, and I could hear voices, muffled, rising, Gerald's among them. But they were behind me now. Margaret's eyes were steady, red-rimmed, but steady. She held the flower without dropping it. "I'm not here to take anything from you," she said. "I just want you to know you were wanted, every single day for 30 years. I looked at her face and understood, with a certainty that went deeper than any blood test, why I didn't match the photo on my parents' mantel. I took the daisy. Behind me, the restaurant door swung open again. Gerald's voice carried into the dark. "Bianca!" I didn't turn around. Gerald came through the front door like a man trying to outrun a fire. Patricia was half a step behind him, clutching her purse to her chest. Then Donna Whitfield. Then 5 or 6 others, spilling out onto the porch and down the steps, drawn by gravity and the oldest instinct in the world, the need to see what happens next. Gerald stopped at the edge of the parking lot. Margaret hadn't moved. She stood beside her car, the daisy now in my hand, her arms at her sides. 30 years collapsed into the 20 feet between them. You have no business being here. Gerald's voice was stripped raw. Margaret looked at him the way a surgeon looks at an old wound. Clinical, sad, too familiar. Gerald, I spent 30 years writing letters you intercepted, hiring lawyers I couldn't afford, filing petitions that got thrown out because you provided paperwork that didn't exist. Her voice was even. Practiced, maybe, but earned. I have every business being here. Patricia stepped forward. Who is this woman? Margaret turned to her. I'm the woman you replaced. The porch crowd went still. Donna Whitfield's hand found the railing. I watched Patricia's face cycle through 3 expressions in about 2 seconds. Confusion, then recognition, then something worse. Something like resignation. The face of a person who's been expecting a knock on the door for 30 years and has finally heard it. Gerald, Donna said from the porch steps, her voice cut clean through the October air. Is she telling the truth? Gerald opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. And that silence, Gerald Atwood's legendary weaponized silence, spoke louder than any confession ever could. Margaret didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She just stood there, beside her car, in the light of the parking lot, exactly where she'd been waiting, for 30 years. Nathan stepped to his car and returned carrying a laptop. He set it on the trunk of Margaret's sedan and opened it. The screen threw pale blue light across all of our faces. With Bianca's permission, Nathan said, I'd like to show you what I found during my investigation. I nodded. He turned the screen toward the small crowd gathered on the sidewalk and along the porch. On the display, high-resolution scans, page after page, in a slow scroll. Letters. Handwritten letters. The first was dated April 14th, 1998. The last was from September 2023. 47 in total. Margaret Calloway wrote a letter to Bianca every single birthday, Nathan said. She also wrote on holidays, first days of school, and sometimes just on ordinary Tuesdays when she missed her daughter. Every letter was mailed to the Atwood residence on Birch Lane. He paused. Not a single one reached Bianca. Margaret's hands were clasped in front of her. She spoke without looking at Gerald. I sent a DNA test kit in 2020. I sent photos of myself so she'd know what I looked like. I sent a card every Christmas. I was protecting my daughter. Gerald's voice was a blade, thin and sharp. I turned to face him. From what? From knowing she has a mother who wanted her? Donna Whitfield stepped down from the porch and walked to Patricia. She put a hand on her arm. Patricia, did you know about the letters? Patricia didn't answer. Her chin was trembling. Tears ran down her cheeks, but this time, something had shifted. The crowd wasn't leaning toward her. Nobody offered a tissue. Nobody said, "Oh, honey." They just watched and waited. 47 letters. I was 30 years old, and I had never received a single one. I let that number sit in the night air like smoke. Donna Whitfield had known the Atwood family for 20 years. She'd sat in their pew. She'd eaten their pot roast. She'd brought casseroles when Patricia had the flu and organized the church brunch when Gerald was promoted to head deacon. She was not a dramatic woman. She wore sensible shoes and prayed before meals and believed, deeply, genuinely, that family was the bedrock of everything. So when she spoke, the parking lot listened. Gerald, she let his name hang for a moment. I have sat in your pew every Sunday for 2 decades. I trusted you. I trusted this family. She pointed at Margaret without looking away from Gerald. But I am standing here watching a mother cry for the child that was taken from her. And you are telling me she's the problem? Gerald said nothing. You don't get to play God with someone's child, Donna said, and still sit in the deacon's chair. 3 women from the church, Barbara Brennan, Carol Oakes, and Lillian James, stepped off the porch and stood behind Donna. Not a word spoken, just the solidarity of women who'd heard enough. Patricia reached for Donna's arm. "Donna, I love Bianca. You know how much I love her." Donna looked at Patricia with an expression I can only describe as exhausted mercy. "Loving someone and lying to them for 30 years are not the same thing, Patricia." Patricia's hand fell to her side. Gerald stood alone. No ally, no argument, no exit. The man who'd controlled every room he'd ever entered was standing in a parking lot surrounded by people who were seeing him clearly, some of them for the first time. He straightened his collar, cleared his throat, and walked to his truck without a word. Patricia watched him go. Then she looked at me, then at Margaret. Then she followed Gerald to the truck. They drove away without saying goodbye to a single guest. After Gerald's truck disappeared down Vine Street, 15 people stood in the parking lot of Magnolia's. Nobody went back inside. The birthday cake sat untouched on its table in the back room, candles unlit. Nathan set the laptop on a patio table near the front entrance. The porch light gave just enough glow. "I'll lay out what I found," he said. "Bianca has asked me to share this." He spoke the way he probably once delivered testimony. Ordered, concise, no editorial. First, the birth certificate. Original, filed with the county in 1996. Mother, Margaret Calloway. Father, Gerald Atwood. No amended version. No adoption petition. No legal custody transfer of any kind. Second, a court filing from 2001. Margaret had petitioned for visitation rights. Gerald's attorney submitted documentation claiming a legal adoption had been finalized through a private agency. Margaret's attorney, a legal aid lawyer she could barely afford, couldn't disprove it in time. The petition was denied. "The adoption paperwork Gerald submitted doesn't match any agency records in the state," Nathan said. "I checked all of them." Third, employment records. In 1996, Gerald Atwood was the administrative manager at St. Luke's Regional Medical Center. Margaret Calloway was a 19-year-old nursing student completing a clinical rotation at the same hospital. Gerald was, in practical terms, part of the power structure she depended on to finish her degree. "He leveraged that position," Nathan said. "Margaret was told that if she didn't sign a voluntary relinquishment, her placement would be terminated. Without the placement, she couldn't complete her degree." Karen Mitchell, one of my nurse co-workers, shook her head slowly. Her arms were crossed. Nathan closed the laptop. "This wasn't an adoption. This was coercion by a man who used institutional power to separate a mother from her child." The porch light flickered once. Nobody spoke. It was Donna who broke the silence. She didn't direct her words at Gerald. He was gone. She looked at the place where he'd been standing, then turned to me. "Did Patricia know?" I looked at my mother, my other mother, standing 3 feet from me. Patricia wasn't here to answer, but Margaret was. "She knew from the beginning," Margaret said. Her voice was quiet but carried in the still air. "Gerald brought Bianca home and told Patricia it was handled. Patricia agreed to raise her on one condition, that every trace of me would disappear." Donna closed her eyes. "She couldn't have children," Margaret continued. 4 miscarriages. I didn't know that then. I found out later." She paused. "I understand the grief of that. I do. But understanding it doesn't make it right." Karen Mitchell spoke from the edge of the group. "What about the no-contact order?" Nathan mentioned Margaret was kept away by a legal order. Nathan pulled one more document up on his phone and held it out. "This is the no-contact letter Gerald presented to Margaret in 2008. It uses hospital letterhead from St. Luke's, formatted to look like a legal order." He paused. "It's not a court order. It was never filed with any court. Gerald made it himself." A low murmur moved through the group. Barbara Brennan shook her head. Margaret looked at me. "I believed it was real for 15 years. I didn't have a lawyer to tell me otherwise. By the time I figured it out, another decade had passed." I felt the parking lot gravel under my shoes. I felt the weight of the daisy in my hand. I felt 30 years of intercepted mail, fabricated documents, and weaponized tears pressing down on my shoulders like a winter coat made of iron. And I felt something else, too. The unmistakable, irreversible lightness of knowing. I stood in the middle of that parking lot with Margaret on one side and the ghost of Gerald on the other. 15 people from my church, my job, my whole small-town life, all watching, all waiting. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I'm not abandoning anyone, I said. Gerald and Patricia abandoned the truth 30 years ago. I'm just picking it up. The words came from somewhere deep, somewhere I'd been building a foundation my whole life without knowing it. I don't hate them. I don't hate either of my parents. But I will not spend another day pretending I don't have a mother who has been looking for me since the day I was born. Margaret pressed her lips together. Her eyes were wet, but she didn't cry. She held herself the way I'd seen veteran nurses hold themselves in trauma bays, steady, present, refusing to break when breaking would be the easiest thing in the world. This isn't revenge, I said. This is a correction. Donna Whitfield exhaled, a long, slow breath, like she'd been holding it for the last 20 minutes. I turned to Margaret. I'd like to have coffee with you, tomorrow morning, just us. She nodded. I'd like that. There's a place on 5th Street in Nashville, Bennett's. Do you know it? I know it. I go every Saturday. Of course she did. I almost smiled. I looked at the group one final time. Karen gave me a small nod. Donna had her hand over her heart. Barbara Brennan was already reaching for her phone, probably calling her husband, probably starting the chain that would carry this story through every living room in town by morning. I walked across the parking lot to my car. I set the Daisy on the passenger seat. I did not look back. There was nothing behind me I hadn't already seen. I want to pause again because this moment, standing in that parking lot, choosing truth over comfort, was the hardest thing I've ever done. Harder than any 12-hour shift at the hospital. If you've ever had to choose between peace and honesty with your family, type truth in the comments. And if you haven't been through it, but you know someone who has, share this video with them. Sometimes people need to hear that choosing yourself isn't selfish. Now let me tell you what happened in the weeks after. Monday morning, 9 a.m. I was sitting in the office of a family attorney named Claire Dawson. Nathan had referred me. She had framed diplomas on the wall and a box of tissues on her desk that I didn't touch. I told her everything. She took notes on a yellow legal pad, her handwriting small and fast. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me. You have a strong case for a birth certificate amendment. The original certificate names Margaret Calloway as your mother and Gerald Atwood as your father. Since there was no legal adoption, the amended certificate Patricia is listed on shouldn't exist. What do I need to file? A petition to correct vital records. We'll submit the original birth certificate, Nathan's investigation findings, and a sworn affidavit from Margaret. The court will order the correction. I nodded. What about the fake no-contact order? Claire's pen tapped twice on the pad. That's more serious. Fabricating a document designed to look like a legal order is a criminal offense. Margaret can file a report. I don't want to send my father to jail. That's Margaret's decision, not yours, but I want you to know the option exists. I signed the petition that afternoon. Margaret filed her own papers separately, a motion to vacate the fraudulent no-contact order and a request for the court to acknowledge her as my biological mother on record. When Claire reviewed the relinquishment document Margaret had signed in 1996, she went quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "This was signed under duress by a 19-year-old with no legal counsel, pressured by a man who controlled her professional future. No court today would uphold this." I walked out of Claire Dawson's office into the October sunlight. I didn't file to punish them. I filed so the paperwork would finally match the truth. Gerald didn't go quietly. Gerald never went quietly. He just went quietly enough that you didn't realize you were being handled. Within 48 hours of the birthday dinner, he hired an attorney named Richard Polk. Polk sent a cease and desist letter to Nathan Cross, alleging harassment, trespass, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Nathan forwarded it to Claire Dawson. She read it over the phone to me while I was on my lunch break. "He's claiming you engineered a public humiliation," she said. "I shared a birth certificate at my own birthday party." "Exactly." I could almost hear Claire smile. "Richard Polk is a good lawyer, Bianca. Good enough to tell Gerald what Gerald doesn't want to hear, that if he pushes this into a courtroom, we'll subpoena the hospital employment records from 1996, the fabricated no-contact order, and every intercepted letter. This cease and desist is a bluff." She was right. 3 days later, Gerald withdrew the complaint. No letter, no call. Just a quiet retraction filed with Polk's office. But the social fallout was already moving faster than any lawyer could contain. Donna Whitfield visited Pastor Coleman the morning after the party. She brought Barbara Brennan and Carol Oakes with her. By that Wednesday, the church council had convened a private meeting. By Friday, Gerald was asked to take a voluntary leave from his deacon position. Everyone knew what voluntary meant. Pastor Coleman called Gerald personally. I heard about it later, secondhand, the way you hear about everything in a small town, through the gentle, devastating efficiency of women who talk after Bible study. Gerald apparently listened to the pastor for 4 minutes without interrupting. Then he said, "I understand," and hung up. He didn't fight it. For the first time in his life, Gerald Atwood accepted a loss without trying to reclassify it as a win. Sunday morning, Bennett's Coffee on 5th Street in Nashville. Margaret was there when I arrived, 20 minutes early, sitting at a window table, hands wrapped around a mug like she was trying to absorb its warmth. She'd brought a shoebox, pale blue, dented at the corners, held together with a rubber band. "What's that?" I asked, sitting down. "Open it." Inside were 30 cards, birthday cards, one for every year of my life. The first was store-bought, pastel pink, with a teddy bear on the front. Inside, in the careful handwriting of a 20-year-old, "Happy first birthday, Bianca. I hope you're laughing today. I hope someone is singing to you. Love, your mother." The 15th was a simple white card. "You're 15 today. I wonder if you like music. I wonder if you read books. I wonder everything." The 21st. "You can drink legally now. I hope you're celebrating with people who love you. I hope someday I'll be one of them." I read 6 of them before my hands started shaking. Margaret didn't rush me. She sipped her coffee and watched the street outside. When I could talk again, I asked, "Tell me." She told me. She was 19, a nursing student from a small town in Middle Tennessee. She did a clinical rotation at St. Luke's. Gerald was 27, married, charming, and in charge of the floor assignments. She got pregnant. He said he'd handle everything. And then one day, he put a document in front of her in his office and told her to sign. He said if I didn't, he'd make sure I never finished nursing school. "Did you finish?" Margaret took a long breath. "It took me 7 extra years, but yes, I'm a charge nurse at Vanderbilt now." She reached into the box and pulled out the last card. This year's, written 3 days ago. "I didn't know if I'd ever get to hand it to you." I took it, and for the first time, I opened a birthday card from my mother. Small towns don't need newspapers. They have front porches and grocery store aisles, and the 15 minutes after Sunday service when everyone stands in the parking lot pretending to check their phones. Within 2 weeks, the story had made a full circuit. The 40 guests at Magnolia's told 40 more people, who told 40 more. By the first week of November, there wasn't a household within 10 miles of Calvary Baptist that didn't know some version of what had happened at Bianca Atwood's 30th birthday. Gerald stopped attending Sunday service. Patricia went alone once, sat in the back row instead of the third pew, and left before the final hymn. She didn't return the following week. Donna Whitfield organized a private meeting with the Women's Ministry Board. The motion was brief. Patricia's 3 Mother of the Year commendations would be formally rescinded. "We don't take back love," Donna said, "but we can't leave a plaque on the wall that's built on a lie." At the hospital, my coworkers handled it with the understated grace that nurses tend to bring to personal catastrophe. Karen Mitchell left a coffee on my station with a sticky note that read, "B+, and proud of it." 2 others mentioned separately and privately that they were adopted too. One squeezed my arm in the hallway and said, "You're not alone." I wasn't alone. That was the revelation I didn't expect. I thought the truth would isolate me, that I'd lose my place in the community, my standing, the only identity I'd ever known. Instead, I lost the bubble my parents had built around me. And outside that bubble, the real community was still standing. They weren't perfect, they were just honest. And after 30 years, honest was the only currency I had any use for. The text came on a Tuesday night, 3 weeks after the birthday. I was on the couch with a bowl of soup and a show I wasn't watching. Patricia's name on the screen, A long message. Bianca, I know I was wrong. I know you're hurt. But I love you more than anything in this world. I've loved you since the first night Gerald put you in my arms. Please come home for Thanksgiving. The house feels so empty. I need you. I read it twice, 3 times. It was a beautiful message. It was also, in every way that mattered, incomplete. No mention of Margaret, no acknowledgement of the letters, no recognition of the fabricated documents, no apology to the woman whose child had been taken. It was the same move Patricia had been making my entire life: center the emotion, skip the accountability, and wait for me to fill in the gap with guilt. I set the phone down, made myself finish the soup, washed the bowl, dried it, put it away. Then I picked up the phone and typed, "Mom, I love you too. But love that needs a lie to survive isn't love. When you're ready to apologize, not to me, to Margaret, I'll be there. Take all the time you need." I pressed send, set the phone on the kitchen counter, went to bed. She didn't respond. Not that night, not the next day, not for the rest of the week. Gerald didn't reach out at all. Complete silence. His final weapon, the withdrawal of his presence, the withholding of himself. It was the same thing he'd done to Margaret 30 years ago. Disappear. Wait for the other person to come crawling back. But I wasn't crawling. And this time, neither was Margaret. Thanksgiving morning, I drove 2 hours south to Nashville. Margaret's apartment was on the 3rd floor of a brick building near Centennial Park. Small, clean, a nursing textbook on the coffee table, and a framed photo of a sunset over Percy Priest Lake on the wall. No family photos in the living room. I understood why. She'd been cooking since 6 a.m. The apartment smelled like roasted turkey, garlic mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, and pecan pie. "You made pecan pie," I said. "It's my favorite." She pulled the pie from the oven. Golden brown, caramelized, perfect. "Has been since I was a kid." I leaned against the counter. "It's my favorite too." Margaret stopped. Oven mitts still on. We looked at each other, and something passed between us that wasn't surprise. It was recognition. A thread that had been there for 30 years. Invisible. Unbroken. Patricia always made apple pie. She said it was the family tradition. I'd eaten apple pie every Thanksgiving of my life and never thought to question it. At noon, Margaret's friend from the hospital came over. A nurse practitioner named Valerie, who brought wine and cornbread and hugged me at the door like she'd been waiting to meet me for years. "Margaret talks about you every single day," Valerie said, "and I mean every single day." Margaret set the table for 4. The 4th place was for Valerie's teenage daughter, who arrived late with flour on her jeans from a baking class. Before we sat down, Margaret looked at me. "Is it okay if I say something?" I nodded. "This is my daughter, Bianca." Her voice broke on the 2nd syllable of my name. She recovered fast. "First time I've said that out loud at a dinner table in 30 years. I called Patricia before we ate. "Happy Thanksgiving, Mom." She was crying. "Happy Thanksgiving, baby." I hung up, sat down, picked up my fork. For the first time, I was eating at a table where nobody was hiding anything. First week of December. I drove to Dr. Russell Kemp's house on a gray Wednesday afternoon. He lived in a yellow colonial on the edge of town, retired since last spring, tending a garden that was mostly brown by now. He met me at the door in a flannel shirt and reading glasses. "I figured you'd come," he said. We sat in his kitchen. He made tea neither of us drank. "I knew your blood type didn't match when you were 5, he said, turning the mug in circles on the table. "I ran the panel as part of a routine screening. B positive. Gerald is A positive. Patricia is O negative." He looked up. The math didn't work. "What did you do?" "I flagged it in the file. Gerald called me the next day, asked me to remove the notation." He paused. "And I did." The kitchen clock ticked. A cardinal landed on the feeder outside the window and took off again. "Did you know about Margaret?" I suspected. "Gerald brought you home as a newborn. Patricia had no pregnancy records, no OB visits, no delivery. I'm a family doctor, Bianca. I noticed these things." He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "But I didn't have proof. And Gerald? Gerald was not someone you challenged. How many other people stayed quiet because Gerald wasn't someone you challenged? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. I stood up, extended my hand. He took it with both of his, an old man's grip, firm and sorry. Thank you for being honest now, I said. That's all I can ask. He walked me to the door. On the porch he said one more thing. Gerald wasn't loud. He didn't have to be. The quiet ones are harder to fight. I drove home with the windows down. December air, raw and clean, filling the car like a second chance. January 14th, a Tuesday. I remember because it was sleeting, and I almost didn't make it to the courthouse on time. Claire Dawson met me on the second floor, outside courtroom B. Margaret was already there, sitting on a wooden bench with her hands in her lap. She was wearing the same navy cardigan from the parking lot. I think she considered it lucky. The hearing took 11 minutes. The judge reviewed the petition, the original birth certificate, Nathan's investigation report, and Margaret's affidavit. Gerald had been notified, but did not appear, and filed no objection. The judge signed the order. My birth certificate was amended, this time correctly. Mother, Margaret Calloway. Father, Gerald Atwood. The fake no-contact order was vacated. Gerald could, in theory, face criminal charges for fabricating a legal document, but Margaret told Claire she wouldn't pursue it. I got my daughter back, she said in the hallway outside the courtroom. That's enough. I held the corrected birth certificate in the car afterward, just held it. The paper was new, fresh ink, official seal, the state of Tennessee watermark bright and clean. But the truth on it was 30 years old. My name hadn't changed. My birthday hadn't changed. Only the story behind both of them had been set right. 3 days later, a plain white envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a single house key on a brass ring. No note, no letter, nothing written. I knew Gerald's handwriting, or in this case his refusal to write. The key was to the Atwood house, the house I grew up in. It was his version of an apology, the kind that doesn't require saying, "I'm sorry," the kind that leaves the door open without ever admitting it was shut. I put the key in my nightstand drawer, next to the first envelope Nathan had sent. I closed the drawer. Some doors you open when you're ready, not when someone slides you the key. People ask me what I lost. I'll tell you. I lost Sunday dinners. Gerald and I haven't spoken since the parking lot. Patricia and I text, but it's thin. Surface things, weather and work schedules. The kind of conversation you have with a neighbor you barely know. I haven't been back to the house on Birch Lane. I lost the comfort of not knowing. There's a version of my life where I never answered Nathan's call, never met Margaret, never stood in that parking lot. That version is easier. It's also a lie, and I don't live in lies anymore. I lost the image of a perfect family. The Atwoods are no longer the model household of Calvary Baptist. Gerald's chair in the deacon's row sits empty. Patricia's plaques are off the wall. That's what I lost. Here's what I found. I found Margaret. We have coffee twice a month, every other Saturday at Bennett's in Nashville. She tells me about her shifts at the hospital. I tell her about mine. Sometimes we talk for 3 hours. Sometimes we just sit and read the paper. I found my medical history. Margaret's family carries a BRCA gene variant. I scheduled my first mammogram in November. It came back clear, but now I know. Now I can plan. I found a mirror. For 30 years, I looked at the family portrait above the mantel and saw a stranger staring back. Now I look at Margaret across a coffee table and see my own face. The curly hair, the brown eyes, the way we both tilt our heads when we're listening. I look like someone. I belong to someone. And here's something I didn't expect. Patricia started writing to Margaret. The letters are short, awkward, but they exist. Margaret reads them. She hasn't written back yet, but she hasn't thrown them away either. Gerald's key is still in my drawer. Maybe someday I'll use it. If you're still listening, I want to say something to you directly, not as a character in a story, as Bianca. If you're watching this, and there's a question your family won't let you ask, a question they answer with tears instead of truth, with silence instead of facts, I need you to hear this. That question is not the problem. The silence is. I spent 30 years believing that asking about my own face, my own features, my own blood was an act of cruelty. I was trained to believe that curiosity was disloyalty. That the price of being loved was never looking too closely at the terms. That's not love. That's a contract. And you didn't sign it. Loyalty is not the same as obedience. You can love someone, deeply, genuinely love them, and still demand the truth. Those two things are not enemies. They're partners. The people who tell you otherwise are the ones with something to hide. And if someone cries every single time you get close to an honest answer, those aren't tears. Those are walls. And you have every right to walk through them. It took me 30 years to learn that. I hope it takes you less. I still love Gerald. I still love Patricia. They raised me. They fed me. They drove me to school and sat through my graduation and worried about me during long shifts. I won't erase that. But I will not let gratitude be a gag. I will not let "I raised you" be the end of every conversation that needs to happen. And I will not spend another holiday pretending that a table full of secrets is the same thing as a table full of family. I choose the table where the truth has a seat. I hope you do too. This past October, I turned 31. No restaurant, no back room, no 40 guests or pink peonies or 3-tier cakes with lavender script. Just Bennett's coffee. A corner table by the window. Margaret sitting across from me with a small chocolate cake she'd baked that morning. Lopsided, a little over-frosted, the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. One candle. "Make a wish," she said. "I don't think I need to." She sang happy birthday. Her voice wavered on the high note and cracked at the end, and she laughed at herself, and I laughed with her, and the barista looked over and smiled. "That's the first time my mother has ever sung that to me," I said. Margaret set down her coffee. Her eyes were bright. "I sang it every year," she said. "You just couldn't hear me." We sat there for a long time after the cake was gone, watching people walk past the window, watching the October sun do what October suns do in Tennessee, turn everything gold for an hour, and then let go. My phone buzzed on the table. 2 messages. Patricia. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. I'm trying." Donna Whitfield. "Happy birthday, Bianca. You did the right thing." Nothing from Gerald. I set the phone face down on the table. Margaret reached across and touched my hand, just for a moment. Then she pulled back and picked up her mug. I don't know if my dad will ever say he's sorry. I don't know if Patricia will ever write that letter to Margaret that really says everything it needs to say. I don't know how this ends. But I know this. I will never again celebrate a birthday without knowing who I am. And that, right there, is the only gift I ever needed. That's my story. It's still unfolding. Life doesn't wrap up in a neat bow, and I wouldn't trust it if it did. If you made it to the end, thank you. If something here landed close to home, drop a comment and tell me. What truth have you been sitting on? And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and check the description for more stories like mine. Every story on this channel is about someone who chose truth over comfort. Maybe yours is next.